Are you an autistic adult that talks to yourself? If you do not feel ashamed or alone. For us autistics, it is considered fairly common to engage in talking to ourselves, aka self talk. In this video, I'm going to explain what self talk is, why we use self talk, and why we have conversations with ourselves, and more. So let's get started. Hey, Define Yourselfers, I am Chris Mitchell from theconfidentautistic.com. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I sincerely appreciate you choosing to watch this video at this time. I'm an autistic adult, late diagnosed, a multi-certified life coach, an advocate for autistic adults, and a digital creator empowering other autistic adults and the entire world to embrace autism confidently. If that resonates with you, please consider showing your support of our channel by liking, commenting, or sharing this video. But the best way you can show your support is by subscribing to the channel. And when you do that, please don't forget to ring the bell so you will be notified when new videos are posted and when I go live. For autistic adults, self-talk refers to the act of talking to ourselves, either silently or aloud. Self-talk can manifest as repeating phrases, having internal monologues, or even full conversations in our heads, serving as a tool to communicate our feelings when verbal expression is difficult for us. Self-talk is a form of self-expression, communication, and verbal stemming. Self-talk often serves as a coping mechanism for processing thoughts and information, regulating our emotions, or navigating social situations. Many of us on the autism spectrum use self-talk to cope with sensory differences. We may have trouble filtering out sensory information, which can lead to sensory overload. Self-talk can help us process and manage overwhelming sensations. Also, self-talk, this is my opinion, and I think there's some truth to it. I know it is for me. The self-talk can also help distract or block out some sensory issues. For example, I mentioned this in other videos. I mention it frequently because it's one of my sensory triggers. Is noise. And if there's too many conversations going on, or there's too much visual stimuli, which is another one of my triggers, if I do a little self-talk in my head, that can distract me from the sensory overload and either prevent me from having sensory overload, which can lead to a shutdown or a meltdown, or at least delay it for a while, and maybe even weaken my meltdown or shutdowns. Cognitive processing. Self-talk can help us organize our thoughts and process information. It can also help us understand complex tasks and make sense of our experiences. So self-talk, here's one of the cool things with self-talk. So somebody gives you some directions to do something, and they seem like there's a lot in those directions, like maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. If you kind of repeat it in your mind, do some self-talk, and break it down, that will help you understand what's being told to you. Also, in the category of cognitive processing, talking aloud, doing self-talk where we're talking aloud, can help with organizing thoughts, planning actions, and solving problems by verbalizing steps and strategies, which I kind of mentioned a moment ago, but you can kind of talk to yourself and say something like, the first thing I have to do is get the potatoes out of the refrigerator. Second, I got to wrap them in some microwave friendly paper. Third, I put them in the microwave. Fourth, I set a 7-minute timer on my microwave. Fifth, I do the start button. Six, I pull them out. Seven, I just cut them up. Eight, I apply butter to them. Nine, I go and consume them. 10, I go in the kitchen and I clean up the mess I left, including putting the butter away in the refrigerator. And you can just say those steps out loud to yourself. Talk them out, and that will help you organize them and plan what actions you have to take. And you're solving a problem in that scenario. How do I make myself a baked potato in a microwave? See, by using self talk, we're thinking that out loud. Some of us in the spectrum, we need to do that. We're neurodivergent. Our minds work differently than autistics. Autistics might be able to figure that out on their own. More power to them. But and if we have to do it this way, it's fine. I always believe this, and a lot of kids do in school, especially in math classes back in my generation. It doesn't matter how I got the right answer, as long as I got the right answer. Math teachers wanted us to show our work, and unless it was exactly the way he thought we should do the work, if we got marked down on it. But I always believed, if as long as we got the end solution that we wanted, it doesn't matter how we get to there. That's the cool thing about computers. There's more than one way to copy and paste some text from one document to another, or one spot in a document to another location in a document. The results are still the same. There's just different ways. That's the same thing with us using self talk as compared to holistics who could just, okay, I got to do this, and they instantly know that. Well, we have to break it down. Doesn't mean we're dumber than anyone else. We just take a different path to our success. Now, I'm a person with multiple disabilities. I mentioned that in other videos. I'm visually impaired and I'm physically disabled. And I don't look at those as limitations on me or obstacles. I look at them as challenges. And I do the same with my autism. I believe I can do anything anyone else can do, a non disabled person can do, an autistic can do. I just might have to take a different path. And that's okay. We still get the same end results. Another reason we engage in self talk or talking to ourselves is for emotional regulation. Self talk can help us identify triggers, develop coping strategies, and regulate our emotions. When we're doing self talk, I know when I'm doing self talk, I'm often checking in with myself. I will actually ask myself, how are you doing? Are you okay? And then, and I often do that when I'm kind of feeling anxious or stressed out, and I will say to myself something like, "No, I'm kind of stressed out right now." Then I will ask myself, "What's stressing you?" And okay, it's the noise of the TV going 24 hours a day in the living room. So I've identified a trigger, and then I have to come up with coping strategies. Now, I can't yell at my wife and tell her to turn off the TV. She's battling stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, and that helps her be distracted from the pain she's under. So I got to come up with other coping strategies, like maybe wearing a headphones or hiding out here in my office or listening to calming music in the bedroom. Doesn't matter. I have to develop those coping mechanisms. But for me to do that, I have to identify the problem before I can fix it. And self talk helps me do that. And speaking of emotional regulation, self talk can be used to soothe our anxiety. You know, if I'm really anxious, I mean, I got my needle ball, I got my Waggles, Warmy dog, I got weighted blankets, got other sensory related issues. But when we use self talk to soothe our anxiety when we're anxious, we can tell ourselves it's going to be okay. Take a deep breath. We can become our own best friend with our self talk. And self talk can also help us manage stress, same as soothing anxiety. And it can help us process strong emotions by verbalizing our feelings. And there are times, I know for me, I feel like crying and I don't know why. Some strong emotion is causing that. So I will do self talk with myself to try to figure out why I feel like crying and work my way through that process. Don't we process those emotions? Sometimes I'm successful at that. Sometimes I cannot identify what that emotion is or causing that emotion, which is not uncommon in autistics. But there are times it does help. And when when it is helpful, then in that case, self-talk is beneficial. But even if it isn't, it doesn't hurt to try, right? Another reason we engage in self-talk is for communication purposes. Self-talk can help us compensate for communication challenges. It can also be a unique method of communication. We kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but with self-talk, we can work out in our mind out loud, like talking to a friend to solve a problem or to communicate something. And sometimes we have to do this self talk to help us understand what's going on before we can explain what's going on to another person. We have to figure it out ourselves first before we can tell someone. So sometimes the best way of doing that is through self talk with ourselves. Which kind of leads into our next point of why we use self talk, and that's for social preparation. We can use self talk to rehearse conversations or scenarios out loud, and that can help us feel more prepared for social interactions. This is also known as scripting. So we can kind of do in our mind, okay, I'm going to say this to my wife, and then she's probably going to say this, then I'll say that. So you kind of know what to expect and how to handle it. And sometimes you got to talk that problem out loud to yourself, and that's okay. Another Or actually, yeah, another benefit is one more. There's two left. I thought there's only one. Three, two, one. Reviewing conversations is another reason we use self talk. We may like to review conversations with ourselves, which is also known as scripting. I think the first one, I would call it pre scripting. This is post scripting, but that's just me. And this can be a source of comfort, especially if we are excited or anxious about something. I use this myself. I would review conversations in my mind, even out loud to myself, because it went so well. I was so happy about it, and I guess that would be comforting myself when I'm excited. And so I will review conversations. Sometimes I review conversations that did not go well and try to figure out what did I do wrong or what went wrong. And I got to remind myself it's not always my fault. I know this, to me, it is. I believe it is with other autistics. Tell me if you agree with this or not in the comments. That we often think we're the problem, and we're not always the problem, but we blame ourselves first because of the ableism and other negative stereotypes we receive from autistics. But it's not always all our fault. If we did the best we could to communicate, all we're responsible is for our actions. We're not responsible for somebody else's reaction to what we do. We just got to be me. I can only do me. And you can only do you, and that's what we should be focusing in on. But yeah, there are times that we use self-talk to review conversations because it went so well and we want to learn from it, or it did not go all that well and we want to learn from it so we could do better next time. And the final point I'd like to bring up for why we use self talk is for sensory processing. Sometimes the act of speaking aloud, which is our own small self talk with ourselves, sometimes the act of speaking aloud can provide needed sensory input. There are times that when I'm alone or even around people, but I do suppress it when I'm around other people. That I'm not getting enough sensory input. It's too quiet. It's too awkward, and I will do some self talk in my mind, sometimes out loud, just so I can have some sensory input. Because even though noise is a trigger to me, not enough noise can also be a trigger, and that would help me with that. Or if I'm not getting enough sensory for something else, I would do that. Like if we have a power outage at the house and the internet's down, TV's down. Okay, I know I complain about TV being on all the time, but total silence for extremely long durations. First of all, it can be peaceful to me, but when they get longer, they become stressful, and I need some sort of noise and sensory input because there's none. So I use self talk to help me through those times. I know I mentioned this earlier, but let's take a deeper dive into talking to ourselves. Because talking to ourselves is a form of self talk. And many of us feel ashamed of it that we talk to ourselves because we believe, and I believe there's some truth to it. We do it a lot more than our holistic peers, and we probably been scolded or shunned about it. I know I've talked to myself for as long as I can remember. Okay. And I talk out loud to myself. And I remember doing it in my bedroom when I was a little kid. My mom came in and said, "Stop doing that. Stop talking to yourself. That's weird," or something to that effect. And it made me ashamed of that. Well, as we learned earlier, talking to ourselves is self-talk, and self-talk is a form of verbal stimming. Therefore, when we talk to ourselves, it is verbal stimming. And although society has told us it's wrong, something's wrong with you, which we're going to get into that in a moment, if there really is something wrong with us, but it is something that is a form of self-talk and a form of stimming. And like I mentioned earlier in this video, it's not uncommon in our community. Now, we often talk to ourselves as autistic adults to help us process information, manage anxiety, and navigate social situations. I mentioned that early in the video, but I just wanted to reiterate that because we're going into a specific type of self-talk, and that is talking to ourselves. For us autistics, talking to ourselves can take various forms, ranging from repeating words or phrases that we find significant or comforting to full conversations. And I'm going to be honest with you on this video, totally transparent. I have a full conversation with myself, multiple ones every single day. Been that way since a little kid. And I know I mentioned a moment ago, my mom told me, stop doing that. It's bad. It looks weird and all. And I tried one day. I said, you know what? I'm gonna stop this. I'm gonna go cold turkey. I'm not gonna talk to myself. And that lasted about a minute. And then I started going nuts in my mind because I needed that stem. So I've done it since then. I've hidden it for a lot of years. My wife noticed it in our marriage because with someone around you 24 hours a day, they're going to notice it no matter how well you try to mask it, which masking it can be harmful to yourself. So now I'm coming out about it. I accept it. I'm owning it. It's fine. So I just wanted to get that off my chest and share that aspect of self talk. We autistic adults often engage in conversations with ourselves, which can manifest as internal or external dialogue. We often engage in conversations with ourselves to communicate our thoughts and feelings effectively, especially when other forms of expression are challenging, essentially acting as a coping mechanism to help us feel more in control and understand our experiences and emotions better. We kind of mentioned that throughout the video, but I really want to make that point to you that there's a purpose to why we talk to ourselves, why we have conversations with ourselves. It's not because we want to be different and unique. It is an important part of us for many of us on the spectrum that we have to live with. For me, it's one of the parts I have been most embarrassed about. Obviously, I'm not, because if I was, I would not be open about it in this video. But it is an area that it does have a lot of stigmatization for us because of society's norms, but it is norm for our society, the adult autism community. So if you do this, if you do self-talk, you have conversation with yourself, you talk out loud, does not necessarily mean you're autistic. But if you are autistic, that's part of the autism experience. And if you're on the spectrum and you don't do that, don't think, wow, I'm not autistic. You still are. The most important point I want to get across to you today is this, that talking to ourselves, including full conversations with ourselves, either internally and out loud, is considered a normal occurrence among people on the autism spectrum. You're not weird. You're fine. We've been told we're weird for doing this. They're wrong. It's part of our culture, the autism culture. And if you do this, embrace it and own it. It's yours. Is talking to yourself a bad thing or a sign of a serious mental health issue? Well, no. Talking to yourself out loud as an autistic adult is not necessarily a sign of a serious mental health issue. Talking to yourself is not always a problem. While it may seem unusual to others, especially to autistics, talking to yourself is not inherently a negative behavior, especially if it's helping you function effectively. If your self talk or talking to yourself becomes disruptive in public settings, it might be helpful to find strategies to manage it. You're talking to yourself, your self talk. For example, you might Try using a quiet self-talk within your mind, internalizing it, or finding private spaces to process your thoughts in verbal self-talk that you do out loud. While self-talk is common in our community, if the behavior becomes disruptive, excessively frequent, or accompanied by other concerning symptoms like hallucinations and or delusions, it is important to consult a mental health professional. Now it is your turn. Do you use self-talk as an autistic adult? How do you use self-talk? Does it benefit you? Share whatever you're comfortable with in the comments on this video or in the conversation in our Facebook group, Autistic Adults Embracing Autism. Now, I may not respond to every single comment, but rest assured, I do read each and every single comment on this video and post it in our group. So this is Chris Mitchell, aka The Confident Autistic, reminding you that now is the time for you to embrace autism confidently. Join me live Thursday nights for The Confident Autistic Live, where I answer your questions, we discuss this week's videos, offer support, and more. The fun starts Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time in the US of A. Be sure to click the bell when you subscribe to the channel to be notified when the party begins.